Vampire Blood Trilogy by Darren Shan. So I don't know if you're familiar with these books. I guess they're from the Vampire Blood series. The first book in the trilogy, the trilogy is 3 books: Cirque de Freak, The Vampire's Assistant, and Tunnels of Blood, which have been kind of repackaged for publishing reasons into one edition and just known as the Vampire Blood Trilogy. Now, these books were originally written in English, but they're very popular in Japan, in translation, at least, translated into Japanese. So when I was teaching at the junior high schools in Japan, I kept seeing these books everywhere. Many of my students were reading them. I actually thought they were Japanese books for the longest time, and that's because there's a little bit of a gimmick going on with the publishing. The author's real name, whatever it is, you can find it on Wikipedia, I'm sure. I don't remember it offhand. But they don't actually print the author's name on the books. Darren Shan is one of the characters in the books, and the conceit of the books is it's kind of it's written by the character, it's first-person narration. So they put Darren Shan as the author, even though that's not really the author, that's one of the characters. What they did in Japanese then is they had like Darren Shan's Vampire Trilogy, and then they had the name of the Japanese translator. But because there was kind of only one author's name listed, like the translator, I thought the translator was the author. That's probably of interest to nobody but me, huh? Anyways, for the longest time, I thought these were Japanese books. They're very popular in Japan, but they were originally written in English. So they're fantasy adventure / horror books that are kind of aimed at the young adult market, preteen, adolescent books. Now, when I was a kid, I always avoided these kind of books like the plague. Like, if I wanted to read a horror book, I wanted to read an adult horror book. Like, I didn't want to read like a horror book written for kids, right? Because then it's going to be like approved by teachers and it's going to be sanitized and stuff like that. They had some of this stuff when I was a kid. I think the Goosebumps series was out there. But I was always like, no, I'm going for the horror stories for adults instead. And yet, reading this book, The Vampire Blood Trilogy by Darren Shan, there's some pretty frank stuff in here. I don't know, maybe the standards have changed since I was a kid. But there's a mildly graphic description of a vampire getting his intestines ripped out. There's a kid eaten alive by a werewolf. And there's a misguided environmentalist who tries to free the wolfman from a cage and then gets his arms bitten off. I'm not sure if that's some sort of subtle political jab, like, that'll teach those dirty hippies. I don't know. But several of the main characters in this book meet with gruesome ends, which does add some suspense to the book. When a character is in danger in this book, they are really in danger. You can't assume everything's going to turn out all right just because it's a children's book. What kills this book, though, for me at least, is the infantile style. I don't know, maybe it's unfair to harp on a young adult book for stylistic concerns, but I feel like there's a lot of children's books out there that are really well written. Like Harry Potter is much better well written than this. The characters in the Vampire Blood Trilogy, they talk like they're in a book, especially the kid characters in the book. All of them have very flat dialogue. The main characters do a lot of stupid things for reasons I can't figure out. I think they just do stupid things to advance the plot or for the point of creating conflict. Because of the bare bones style of this book, it is pretty easy to read, but it's broken into a lot of really short chapters. Like, the chapters are only 2 or 3 pages long. which makes it a little bit jarring to read too much of it in one sitting. I felt like because it was broken up into so many little bits, I had a hard time just getting engrossed into it for long periods. Now, this collection is referred to as a trilogy, but really it's not a trilogy. I mean, there's no overarching story to connect these 3 books. Rather, there's a larger series, and this is just the first 3 books of the series, which the publishers are now calling a trilogy, just so they can put them all together and kind of sell more copies. I'm kind of interested to find out how the series turns out now after having read the first 3 books. But they're so poorly written, I doubt if I'll keep reading them. If I do keep reading them, I'll come back with more reviews.